Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today, and it is WWE Hall of Fame season. On Monday, the Hall of Fame main eventer for Wrestlemania 33 in Orlando was named, and to me, honestly, it was a little bit of a surprise. Definitely, he was on the list of people that are going to be going into the Hall of Fame someday, but I didn't think that it was going to happen at WrestleMania 33. I thought that maybe it would take a year or two for WWE for him to think that the stink of TNA would wind off. I really honestly thought that Daniel Bryan was going to be going in to the Hall of Fame this year and be the main eventer. Maybe they make him wait until next year because of the fact that he's on SmackDown as the GM. But honestly, in my mind, I think that honestly, because of Total Bellas and because of Total Divas, and because of the fact that when Daniel Bryan won his first championship, it would be against John Cena. It would make sense for Cena to do the speech for Bryan, but at the same time, because of their relationship with SmackDown, Shane giving him the speech would make a lot of sense. But then again, also Kane with Team Hell No, and the rise of Daniel Bryan happened at that time when Daniel Bryan, to me, was supposed to be sort of getting killed off after losing the championship to Sheamus in his run that ended at WrestleMania 28. But we're talking about Kurt Angle coming home. I'm sure that right now Dixie Carter is sitting at home thinking that WWE is stealing all of her wrestlers to put into the Hall of Fame because of what their accomplishments were in TNA, tipping her hat and basically saying thank you. I had these guys wrestle their best time of their careers with Sting as well as Kurt Angle. And even if you go back to WrestleMania 31, Kevin Nash, 3 years in a row, the main eventer for the WWE Hall of Fame is going to be somebody who spent a good quality amount of time wrestling for TNA. Very funny. It is what it is. Hey, if you go back to WrestleMania 28, they put in a guy into the Hall of Fame that was wrestling for TNA at the time. Ric Flair. Funny stuff. But honestly, to me, if you look at the Wikipedia page, you pull up the career of Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle wrestled longer in the company of TNA than he did for WWE, but to me, honestly, Kurt Angle's name was made in WWE. One of the fastest rising rookies there's ever been. Somebody who's just sort of come into the world of professional wrestling, took the time training and been on the main roster, and just pushed right up to the main event. I'll be honest to you, when Kurt Angle wrestled his first match on pay-per-view, I can't remember what the name of the show was, but I think he wrestled against Shawn Stasiak. I didn't even pick Kurt Angle to win the match. I didn't really think that it was going to be much. He came in, he had his undefeated streak, he had his 3 eyes. He would hold this undefeated streak until I believe the Royal Rumble when he lost to Taz, which I think wasn't a full year, but it was damn close to winning. To me, honestly, when I think about Kurt Angle, there was some of the best moments that I think of his career is him jumping on that milk truck in Sacramento, California at a Monday Night Raw. I wasn't at that show because it was in Sacramento. A lot of people think that I was there. I was living in Atlanta at the time, and I remember I came home from work and I was watching Raw on a VHS. I had to record Raw on a VHS, and I watched it. That's 2001 because it was during the invasion, and I felt bad. I worked nights. I didn't normally get home until 2:30 in the morning from working at Pizza Hut. My buddy had to be up at like 7 in the morning most of the time. He did something with water. I don't really know what his job was, but when Kurt Angle came out on that milk truck, I exploded. On one part, I thought that it was one of the coolest things I ever saw in professional wrestling. I thought that it was one of the most funniest things I'd ever seen in the world of professional wrestling. It was the best way to mock Kurt Angle. Mock Stone Cold Steve Austin and put Kurt Angle over at the same time. It's probably one thing that's happened in Sacramento that I really wish I would have been able to be at. A lot of people think that I went to No Mercy with Triple H against Kane. I didn't get to go to that show either because I wasn't living here at the time. But, Angle, damn good wrestler. All through WWE, through TNA. he never really had moments of letting up. He's somebody that gave 100% to the world of professional wrestling. He was a guy that was not scared to put other people over. He was a guy that just went out there and knew that he was going to have the best match on the card. It didn't matter if he won. It didn't matter if he was putting somebody over. Some of the best matches that I can remember from his career in TNA is when he was wrestling against Nigel McGuinness. When Nigel first made his debut for TNA, and they had like at least 4, maybe even 5 matches in a row. And to me, honestly, I was never a Ring of Honor guy, but I had heard the buzz about Nigel McGuinness because of the fact that he was trying to get signed by WWE, and WWE sort of signed him and then let him go, which made him jump to TNA. And he came in and immediately had those matches against Angle, and I thought they were some of the best wrestling matches that I'd ever seen in my life. And for somebody coming in out of an outside company that wasn't as big as TNA, for Kurt Angle to make sure that Nigel got his shit in, even though I think that Kurt won all of those matches, if I remember right, still made Nigel look like he was $1 million to the point where fans were voting Nigel McGuinness to be the #1 contender. This was during the Eric Bischoff era of TNA, when he was trying to find ways to change up the world of professional wrestling, thinking that a top 10 and the stepping stones to get to the TNA world title and be a #1 contender would make sense and get people involved in voting. They voted Nigel #1, and I believe that he hadn't won a match in a while because of the fact that he was wrestling against Kurt every night. But he was awesome. He just was fucking awesome. And Kurt was too. Kurt's took a lot of bumps throughout his career. He's been beaten up. He's been bruised. He's came out and he's talked about the fact that, due to being on the road and wrestling in matches that really took a toll on his body, he was addicted to painkillers. He's had his troubles with, alcohol. He hasn't been the perfect model citizen, even though he is the All-American Kurt Angle, gold medalist for the 1996 Olympic Games in the sport of wrestling here in the United States. Which was looked at as a huge upset at the time. I think that Kurt was looked at as a guy that was one of the best wrestlers there was, but I don't think anybody had him marked down to win the gold medal that year, and it just was hard determination. Him going from that and jumping into the world of wrestling after his failed attempt at being a sports broadcaster, just being a guy who talked about the sports on the local news in Pittsburgh. If things would have panned out, he had offers to go to WCW. He had offers to go to ECW. The big story is that Kurt was there the night that Sandman crucified Raven, and or was it the other way around? Raven crucified the Sandman, I think is what it was. Yeah, because then Raven had to come down and he had to apologize. And because of that fact, Kurt Angle flipped out and he left. And just basically said that if ECW used any footage of him being at that show, that he would sue him because of the fact that he was so against what they had done. But I think that him going and being a part of WWE and going through the Funkin' Dojo, and then getting sort of the best wrestlers in the world to work with. Because if you think when he came in and he worked his way up the ranks, he was wrestling against guys like Chris Benoit, he was wrestling against guys like Chris Jericho, Triple H, The Undertaker, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin. The guy was the man. The guy was just awesome. He deserves everything that he's getting. All the praise from all the wrestlers around the world, coming out and saying how good this guy was and how just of a natural athlete he was. He deserves it. He's one of the best. He was very entertaining. He was the guy that went out there and was not afraid to take shots at himself. One of the most famous things that people remember about Kurt Angle is the fact that he wore that stupid little kid cowboy hat like Woody from freaking Toy Story. By Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince McMahon were wearing badass cowboy hats because he wanted to be part of the team. He wanted to be part of the crew, and he wanted to mean as much to Austin. He wanted to mean as much to McMahon as Austin did. It's hard to point out any real times that Kurt wasn't at the top of his game. He did Raw, he did SmackDown, was champions for both brands. He went to ECW at the time when WWE was trying to sort of they weren't really trying to like downplay him. I think he was going to be a main player in ECW if he would have stayed with the company. He left shortly after ECW was made, but he was one of the 2 draft picks that Paul Heyman got, and I think he really would have fit the brand. They didn't make him the champion right off the bat because Rob Van Dam did, but I think that he was just going to be a guy that came out there and had a really physical wrestling match and was able to be a big part of that brand. They were trying to give him some time to be able to sort to get clean. If I remember right, when he was drafted and ECW first came, he didn't wrestle on the first shows, but he was there. But I could be wrong. I haven't watched those shows in a long time. But then shortly after he got his release, they sort of did it the Jeff Hardy way, where Jeff's contract expired and they didn't re-sign him because they wanted Jeff to go home, get his mind right. If WWE knew that he was on drugs, they needed him to get clean. Shortly after that, Jeff got arrested and showed up in TNA because he needed a place to go work, and they wanted him. Kurt, told Vince that he wanted his release, wanted to go home and get his body right, and he did. And Dixie Carter called. He signed with TNA. Thought it was a fresh start. When he was there, he said a lot of bad things about Vince. If you go back and you watch Kurt Angle's shoot interview, I believe it was done by High Spots. He calls Vince the devil, and has a lot of things to say about Triple H, say about Vince, and a lot like Billy Gunn. That stuff was sort of used against him for a long time. People think that he never had a chance to be there. I think within 2, maybe 3 years ago, Kurt's contract was going to be coming up with TNA. Kurt called to see if he could come home at that point, and WWE said they didn't have any plans for him, and they didn't really want him back. Him coming back and being a part of WWE in the Hall of Fame is awesome for him. He was on ESPN tonight. There's a clip of him that I saw on Twitter basically saying that he hasn't closed the door on wrestling for WWE again. I'll be really surprised if he gets to wrestle. I'm not a big fan of guys going into the Hall of Fame on Saturday. Well, this year the Hall of Fame got moved, but you know what I'm saying? Like going in and wrestling at Wrestlemania, like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat did, like Ric Flair did. To me, honestly, it points the finger at Flair more than anybody else, with him going into the Hall of Fame at WrestleMania 24 and then having his retirement match the next night. Come on, guys. Why didn't you put him in at 25? I know that 25 was Stone Cold Steve Austin's career. At night they wanted to put him in. They wanted to put him in Texas. But think what could have happened if he did save Flair. You could have put him in at 26 and saved that class. But they thought they were going to get Warrior. And they waited and they waited and they waited and they waited too long until Ted DiBiase, a great wrestler, but not really a marquee name, headlined WrestleMania 26's thing. So Kurt Angle going in buys WWE a year. Pretty soon we're going to get to the point where there's not going to be Hall of Famers that are able to go in. WWE in their back pocket. As of right now, they got, Vince, Triple H, Undertaker, The Rock, Daniel Bryan. That'll get you a few years down the road. But the WWE is going to try and stack a Hall of Fame one year due to either low attendance or maybe low ratings on the network, and they're going to shoot through those names pretty fast sooner than later. So we'll see. I'd like to see Shane McMahon do the speech for Kurt. Curtis came out and said that he wants Stone Cold Steve Austin. We'll see if they'll be able to put that together for him. But it's going to be a fun time. I'm looking forward to seeing Kurt's speech. I haven't watched the Hall of Fame, honestly, in a couple of years. I haven't watched 31 or 32s on the network because of the fact that I wasn't there. 31, I made an appearance at the show and left to go to the Super Show. I don't think the Hall of Fame goes up against the Super Show this year. But honestly, because of the network, I still would go to the show over the Hall of Fame induction. I'm just over the Hall of Fame. Rikishi, the Godfather going in, kind of blew it for me.